I'm Vrinda Datta. Joined CECED as director and visiting professor just 2 months ago. And before that, I have a long career with Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Mumbai. And I've largely worked in the field of early childhood development. Today we have, it's been an exciting day at CECED. In the morning we had Kathy with us to discuss her, one of her research, longitudinal research that she has covered for over 15 years. And it was wonderful interacting with her and getting the insights into her study. And I'm sure this other aspect of parents that she's going to talk about is going to be equally interesting.
I'm going to talk about two studies, intervention studies in England. It's very early days. You did come to my seminar this morning, and that was on a very large-scale study with, absolutely impeccable sampling, impeccable assessment, and impeccable statistics. What I'm going to talk to you today, this afternoon, is very early stage work where nothing is impeccable. These are just our newest work. But I thought it would be fun to share with friends and colleagues kind of the early stages. We don't begin with samples of 3,000 and 20 million pounds. We begin with very small grants, where we go around, and if we get 5,000 pounds here or there, we're quite pleased. So you're getting the kind of the early stages of work, but our work on parents is our newest. So now, I think we're okay. Yeah. The outline of today, I'm going to talk about the importance of the home learning environment. And in establishing the importance, I will use data from Project EPI, which is what I talked about this morning in the center. And that is the big scale, impeccable study. And then I'm going to have a video, 2 short videos of a parent app, which we're just beginning to use in England. It's early days. I'm sure you have 1,000 creative Indian apps as well. But we have done an evaluation in England on what's the impact on children's development of this parent app. So I want to share that with you. The design isn't yet brilliant. It's still early stages, but we are making a start. So I'd like to discuss that. I want to talk about, if we don't have apps or high tech, we have low tech ways, and there's another project in England. This is the second intervention I want to tell you about, where we just have school teachers who teach early childhood classrooms, and they run parent workshops, and so we evaluated that as well. So we evaluated this high tech glitzy app, but we also evaluated kind of bread and butter workshops that teachers run for parents, and they both work. They both work. So, and then I'll talk about next steps, where we should go. So this, part 1 of my talk is, what is the evidence that what parents do at home really makes a difference in children's development? And in the Project EPI, which is a study, do I have the design? Yeah, here's the design of Project EPI. This is the design. On the left, children come in at 3 years, and we have studied them to the age of 18 now, longitudinal. They had different kinds of early childhood provision. So nursery classes at the very top is early childhood, but it takes place in a primary school, has very expensively well-trained teachers. The next one down are playgroups, which take place in village halls, often run by parents, much less expensive. The next one down are private day nurseries, which you all know about, where the parents pay. The next one down are nursery schools like Montessori, which I'm sure you have lots of them here in India. And so different kinds of provision. Children were assessed at 3. They were assessed at 5 when they went to school. And what we call key stage 1 is when children are in year 1 and 2. And we worked in 600 schools. So we began with 141 preschools, but the children spread into 600 primary schools. We worked in all 600. And then they went to secondary school, and we have 800. So Project EPI has begun at 3. We finished, our last reporting is at age 18. But the real question is, what is the contribution to each child development of being in one of these 141 schools? So that is the question. Okay, this is what we found. There was a moderate positive association between the home learning environment, which we assessed through structured interview, 7 areas of learning at home on a scale of 1 to 7. So nice normal distribution, those of you who are statistical geeks. And every family, 3,000 families, we have a picture of how much support they give for children at home. Now, EPI wanted to know how much support because we wanted to covary it in order to get the educational outcome. But now, today, we're looking just at the home learning environment because I want to show you what's the impact of the home learning environment on children's development. So EPI is really about preschool, but today I'm using just its data from the home learning environment. We found that some parents who had a very high social and economic status category, like the father was a judge and the mother was a consultant neurologist, the children could have quite a poor home learning environment. On the other hand, we had some very poor families where parents were neighbors, and the children had quite a rich home learning environment. And what we wrote in EPI is it's more important for the child's development what the parents do and not what the parents are. And that was the slogan. We talked earlier about how we talk to Parliament, how we come up with kind of very shorthand ways of describing our data. So one of our descriptions is what the parents do at home is more important than who they are. Okay, but there is the correlation that everybody knows it's about 0.6 between the parent's educational level and the child's mathematics scores or their reading scores or even their sociability. So every study, I've never seen an educational study in any country in the world that has not shown that richer, better educated parents have children who do better. But we're all in this room together because we want early education to be one of the means that we are trying to narrow that gap. We also found that there were gender differences in the home learning environment, and girls have a better home learning environment than boys, by the way. And maybe that explains why girls in the English school system get better grades, except in math. Except Indian girls get very high grades in math. Okay, next one. Now we get to the app. So that is, in England, we got a little bit of funding on the strength of this data. We know that the home learning environment in a nationally representative sample around the country is richer in some homes than in others, and the children who have a really good preschool home learning environment do better in school. And EPI, because we go to age 18, we have shown statistically that the early learning at home is more important than the learning during the primary school at home. So the time to intervene in the home, if you look at the effect size, the home learning environment, the earliest home learning environment has an effect size in a very big statistical model of about 0.35. The primary school home learning environment has an effect size of about 0.15, and the secondary home learning environment is about the same. So the most powerful effect of the home learning environment on 3,000 children in EPI was that early years. So that's why I'm now going to go to 2 interventions with parents that we're trying. And I explained earlier this morning in the seminar what we explained to Parliament, and this will be true too. I say to them there are 2 levers that influence child development. There's a very, very big lever here, and this is the home. And the home is very powerful. It is the strongest influence on the child's outcome. There's another lever, this one smaller, weaker. This is called the preschool, the early childhood center. This is half of the size of the family. But what I say to parliamentarians is, we know very little how to change this, and many of our attempts to change this have failed. We know a lot how to make a really good early childhood. So if you want wise investment, invest in this. It's smaller, but you know what to do with it. I'm not saying don't invest in the home and changing parents. And the 2 studies I have are efforts, but this is the one we don't know very much about. Changing family practices is very difficult. Transforming a child through early education is difficult, but we can do it. So that messages to government, yeah. Okay, now, this is the first of our studies is an app called Easy Peasy, and it was implemented amongst parents who were recruited from children's centers. Now, children's centers in England they're run by municipalities. They're located in poor neighborhoods. So we have maybe 3,000 children's centers around the country. It's not very many. It's a drop in the bucket in England. But every local authority, we have 152 local authorities in England. Everyone has at least one children's center. And the big cities, of course, have 30 or 40. So we implemented the Easy Peasy app, parent app, in children's centers, but in just one poor coastal town. And the app delivers weekly activities straight to the parent's phone. So it encourages parents to support children's learning at home through play. It delivers games directly to the parent's phone. Now, in England, our poor parents have smartphones. Now, I know it would not be the same here, but our poor parents have smartphones. The games seek to improve concentration. Those who heard my talk this morning, I talked about self-regulation. This app aims to improve self-regulation. Those who heard this morning's talk. It tries to improve creativity and determination. And each video is centered on one example of one game. And now, if the technology will work, we'll see if I can do it. What do you think this child is learning? That's your question.
Okay, Aurelia, now we're going to play a game called Tower of Hands. So I'm going to put my hand down, and then you're going to put your hand on top, and I'm going to do that, and you're going to put your hand on top, and we're going to see if we can go high, and then we might go low. My hand, there we go, and then I go on top of this, and you go on top of mine. That's it. There we go. You might have to sit up properly. On top of mine. That's it. And high. That's the way. How high can we go? Yeah? Good girl. Can we go up 2? You ready? 1, 2. And then can we go down 2? Underneath my hand. That's it. Good girl. 2. Well done. Can we do another 2 down? That hand, top hand. Okay, I think we're going to have to try and work on that one a little bit. You go like that, and then like that. If we're here, how do we go down? That's it. Like that, and your next hand goes where? No, underneath. That's it, perfect. And then this one, and then this one. That's it, and then this one. And then this one, that's it, and now this one. Good girl, that's exactly right. And can we go up 4? And count as we do it. 1, 2,
3,
and 4. Well done. Let's see how high we can go. How high can we go? My turn. You might have to stand up. Can you stand up? That's it. And whoop, and me, and you, and me, and you, and me, and you, and me, and you, and me. Yay! Well done. Good girl.
Kind of discuss what's learning, but because we have a timetable we have to keep to, we'll go to the second one. What do you think how is that child's development being enhanced by that kind of play? Which domains of development are being enhanced through this kind of play, delivered to the parents? Now we're going to have the second game, which is also Easy Peasy app. Easy Peasy has, I think, about 55 different games. What's this child learning?
Ready to play that game? Right, we're gonna play I am, she is. Okay? So I'm gonna ask a question, and if it's true for you, then you say I am. But if it's true for somebody else, you have to say she is. So we'll give an example, right? So I'll say, Who's still in school?
I
And then you have to say she is.
She is.
am. She is.
Alright? Alright, so I'll start. Who's still in school?
I am.
She is.
She is.
Yeah, okay? And we'll go, who's older?
I am. It is.
Oh,
She is.
She is.
okay? Alright. Who's not in school yet? And you have to say she is.
She is.
Alright?
Who sings the most?
She does. I do.
You sing it, are you singing all the time?
I just sing night.
Oh.
We sing it every day.
Who reads the most?
I do. She's her.
Who likes to go to the park the most?
I do.
Oh, you both like going to the park.
I think it's probably Bethany more.
She like
Because even when it's raining, she likes to go to the park.
Who eats the most food?
She does.
Yeah.
I do.
I do.
Ready? Who's tallest? Who's tallest? Who's taller?
Wow, I guess I am taller. Who has the most energy?
Me.
I would say it's I think it's a tie. Actually. Yeah, it's a tie. It's a tie. So that's
Yeah!
As a small-scale randomized control trial. Now, many people will say something so new, you would do formative evaluation and you would evaluate it in a qualitative way. But we are quantitative researchers and we are trialists and we are experimentalists. So the government, the charities, not the government, the charity funded us to do the evaluation because they wanted a trial. They didn't want just a soft qualitative study. So we did a randomized control trial. So what is the effect of Easy Peasy delivered to parents on self-regulation as the child outcome? And what is the effect of Easy Peasy on parents' sense of self-efficacy and their parenting stress? Now remember, this is in a poor town, it's in Bournemouth in England. And many of these parents live stressful life conditions. So we wondered if getting Easy Peasy on your phone every week would reduce stress. Now we'll see what are the results. The study design, we had 150 families recruited from 8 children's centers in Bournemouth. This is all the centers who had it, and all the families were invited to take part, but they wouldn't get the app if they didn't agree to be part of the evaluation. So we had the treatment group got the app right away. The control group were called the late starters. So the parents, when they get recruited, they came to coffee mornings. We told them we have this app. We'll send it to your phone for free. Some of you will begin next week, and some of you will begin 4 months from now because we can't cope with all of you at once. So the 2 groups were randomized, completely randomized at center level, because there may be differences in neighborhoods in the center. So we randomized within centers, but they're randomized to be an early starter or a late starter. So we don't have to control for social class or religion or family, because they are the same families, they've just been randomly assigned. So we think in early stage evaluation, we go for rigor, we go for the jugular, we don't mess around, we go for the rigorous, as rigorous as we can. Okay. The children were between 2 and 6, with the mean age about 3.5. You saw the Tower of Hands is probably better for younger children, and the I am, she is better for older children, but the parents got them all. We had baseline measures because it's a pre-post design. We're not going to look just at post. We really have to look at development over time. And those of you who are geeks, if you have a post-test, sometimes unmeasured differences between the sample, there might be differences, are picked up in the post-test, and that mops up that unexplained variance. So it's a really strong design, and the app was used for 18 weeks, 1 game per week. At post-intervention, we had parent report questionnaires, which we had free on the child and on the parent, and we had parent report questionnaires 4 to 6 weeks after it was finished on post-intervention. And the parents got the app, the control parents got the app later. Okay. Now the measures that we used, pre and post, we used we had measured self-regulation, behavioral self-regulation, cognitive self-regulation, and emotional self-regulation. We measured them on the CSBQ, which is an Australian rating scale. You can find it on the internet. We measured the parent's self-efficacy on the Kendall and Bloomfield scale, which has 6 items on play and enjoyment, 6 items on control, and 6 items on discipline and boundaries. So, and the parent stress index, it's used all over the world. You probably use it in India, which is a 12-item scale on parent-child interaction. Okay. We collected baseline demographics in the first questionnaire that we had at pre-test. So we know parent education, we know the parent jobs, how many children in the family, what language they speak at home. So these are the measures, and now we're going to look at the results. This is the participant flow through the trial. Those of you who do medical research will be very familiar. This is a consort diagram. And we recruited in the beginning, 170. We had to exclude 20 because they didn't meet the criteria. They didn't have a smartphone. I guess some parents thought we were going to give them a smartphone, but we couldn't. Or the child was too young, or the child was too old, or if the child had profound special needs, we couldn't recruit them. So that left 150 to be randomized, and so we allocated to intervention 75, to control 75, and follow-up and analysis. We had only 34 treated parents. Now this is a big limitation of this study. Parents were very keen to fill out the questionnaires at pre-test because they weren't going to get the app unless they finished. But at the end, only half our parents replied. We sent them messages by text, but this was a small-scale study. If I were doing an impeccable study, I would have sent researchers to their houses and hounded them, knocked on their doors, followed them around, and said, stand here, I'll do it. But this was a low-budget study, so we had a lot of attrition, and this is a serious limitation. You see on the control side, we had 41 who completed it. But I feel these parents were heroic, because they filled out all these questionnaires pre, all these questionnaires post, and they didn't get the app yet. So, but maybe we had a few more replying because they were thinking, well, they might not send it to us unless we finish the questionnaires. Okay, so 75 parents gave us post-test data, and they're in the analysis. Because we had so much attrition, we did post-hoc analyses on the demographic data to see if these families differed. Are the ones who stayed in the study richer? Or they have smaller families? Do they have better jobs? But we were very pleased to find out that on the demographics, when we compared the attriters, those who did complete, with those who did complete, there were no statistically significant difference. So we're a little bit hopeful that we have valid results. We did ANCOVA, those of you who are stats interested, and we control for the pretest, we control for gender, we control for the child's age, and we control for the center, because some of these centers were in richer neighborhoods than others. So, some had more ethnic diversity. So even though at individual level we had control for education and jobs, we also, in the analysis, control for center level. Children were nested within centers, so we had, say, 10 children nested within a center, and we did multi-level analyses, those of you who understand that, and we didn't have center effects. We did we treated center as a fixed effect at level 1 if you're a statistician, and there were no center effects. So we thought we were safe to go ahead with the ANCOVA. I mean, I know there are a few statisticians here. So here are the results, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 outcomes. We have play and enjoyment. We have control of your child, discipline. And then we have discipline and boundaries, which was significantly different. We have the PSI, is the Parent Stress Index. We have 2 subscales on that. And then on the child measure, we had behavioral self-reg, cognitive self-reg, and emotional self-reg. Okay. The only 2 significant differences, pre and post, 14-week cooking period, was in the parents setting discipline and boundaries. And looking at those 2, think back and see how children who had those apps, their parents played those games, how maybe they set discipline and boundaries. We thought that we might get more play and enjoyment. You know, I enjoy playing with my child. But all families, even the control group, liked playing with their children. So we did improve that. That was very high to begin with. But we did improve parents setting discipline and boundaries for their children. And we did improve cognitive self-regulation in the child. Okay. So now, I'll give you some examples of cognitive self-regulation. My child sticks at a task until he finishes it, and they scored it on a 1.5. Or my child is always eager to try new things, 1 to 5. So now we look at the limitations. This is a very small scale study. It is a randomized control trial. It has very high internal validity because of the design, but it had problems. And the biggest problem is so much dropout. Now, between the pre-test and the post-test, and our only hope that the results are valid is that there were no differences between the kinds of families who completed and those who didn't complete. It's a small sample. It's only 150. It's in one local community. It's very constrained because the only measures of outcome are parent report. So next time we have repeated it, by the way, in Inner London, and we have had positive results in Inner London. But what we really would like is some external measure of the child. But we don't have that. And we don't have any measure of how much the parents use the app. So we would like to see if there's a dose effect. If the parents who use the app more, their children made more progress, but we haven't done that. So you've seen our first parent intervention. It's a lovely app. It has promising results, and these results are so promising that the government, the Ministry of Education, is now sponsoring at £750,000 a proper evaluation. So you've seen the first. This is kind of the early one, but on the basis of a study like this, which is rigorous, but it's not all conclusive, it's now being evaluated by the government. So we're very, very pleased with Easy Peasy. Now, the second intervention that I wanted to talk about is called the Parent Engagement Network, and it's PEN. And PEN is a training of teachers, which is run by what we call a community enterprise. I'm trying to think, what do you call them? It's non-profit, but it's not a charity. It's a community enterprise. And PEN, the network, trains teachers in primary schools to deliver the workshops to parents. And PEN also provides materials. They provide play bags. They provide all kinds of resources for maths games, tokens, dominoes, picture dominoes. This trial was conducted at school level, so whereas in Easy Peasy, within a center, we randomly assigned. But here, because the teacher was trained in the early childhood class, there would have been too much leakage, so we couldn't. With the app which you do at home, you can randomly assign. But in workshops which are conducted during school hours, it would have been impossible. So we randomized schools and not individuals. This is weaker because the sample size in the end is 8. No, the sample size, I think we have 10 and 10. It's weaker because the randomization is not at individual level, it's at school level, okay? The control group got the intervention the following year. So those parents were told that we're going to, flip a coin, we're going to randomly decide which schools are going to get this intervention. And if your school doesn't get it this year, they'll get it next year. So the program, PEN is we call it not-for-profit social enterprise. I mean, that's kind of legally what it is social enterprise. It supports schools. It provides training for staff and parents. It has very creative materials. It has play bags. It has maths games. And this trial focused on the effects of this training of teachers to run workshops in their own schools to see if the parents could provide a better home learning environment. So we began when the child was in nursery, and these nurseries, the children were 3 and 4, but the nurseries were attached to primary schools. So the nurseries, they are early childhood centers, but they're attached to primary schools. Okay, so we have maths, we have phonics, and the parents came to 4 workshops. The first term, 3 workshops the second term, and 2 workshops the third. So 9 workshops altogether over the year for parents. So the intervention schools, the staff were trained. In the control schools, the staff were not trained because we're hoping they're not working with parents. But following the staff training, the next year, the control schools got it. So schools were randomized in September. In October, we gave pretest. In November, the intervention was delivered. Intervention to June, 6 workshops the teachers gave, and the post-toast in July. So we worked in 4 municipalities near Manchester, Salford, Thameside, and Stockport. 4 municipalities. We randomized, I don't know if any of you are medics, we use what's called minimization in the randomization. You do the randomization controlling for certain factors. And so we randomize, it's like stratifying. Stratifying for the proportion of the school of children who get free meals. So those are poor children. We control for the proportion of children who spoke English as a second or third language. We control for the size of the school, and we control for the municipality that it was in. So we have 18 schools altogether, and we have 167 children in this sample. Study design, 167 families, 4 local authorities. Local authority is like the level where the schools are run. We randomize centers, schools, rather than individuals within schools. The intervention schools got trained in the home learning program. The intervention was delivered by trained staff to parents. And post-intervention, we collected post-test data. So as in Easy Peasy, the pre-test instruments and the post-test instruments are the same, and we're looking for change between pre-test and post-test. So this intervention is kind of a rather homegrown intervention. This kind of intervention has been happening for 3 decades. It's kind of an old-fashioned, but it has many strengths. And I'll tell you one of the strengths. I mean, the Easy Peasy went to the parent app, but the parent didn't really have much support. Whereas because these classroom teachers, these nursery teachers are trained, if the parent comes in and the teacher ran a workshop on Friday and the parent comes in on Monday with, Eloise, who's 3 and a half, the teacher says, oh, did you use the story sack? How did Eloise like the princess or the fairy or, the monster? So that although you don't have the glitz of the app, you kind of have daily contact between the teacher who is delivering the intervention and the parent. So we think it kind of has stickiness. There's a kind of stickiness of this. It gets stuck in the school, and the teacher can, because we have randomly assigned nurseries, rather than randomly assigning individuals, they had signs around the room. They had photographs of some of the objects that the parents were trained. So you get an everyday support for that intervention, whereas the app gets parachuted in to the parent's phone. So they're very different styles. Now we're going to see if they worked. Okay, so here we have 20 are randomized. In this study, we didn't have much attrition. So of the 20 that were randomized, we ended up with 18 at the end. So that's pretty good for attrition. And we ended up with over 146 families on whom we have pre and post test data. Here are the measures. We assess them on the early years home learning environment. This is a questionnaire on 7 items, and it is done pre and post. It includes reading together with your child, taking your child to the library, playing with letters and numbers. It's all the things that parents might do at home to support the child's development. But we also used a new instrument that I don't think you're using in India yet. It's called the Peasy. It was developed at the University of Cambridge, and it's a rating scale that teachers complete on school readiness. Now, I know you have your own Indian school readiness, but I'll be interested to see how they compare. But the Peasy has 4 subscales, as behavioral adjustment, language and cognition, daily living skills, and family support. So it's only 2 measures at post-test that we're going to pay attention to. So we did multi-level regression. Now we have children nested within schools, but those of you, I know there's one person, the interclass correlation was about 0.15. So we knew that there were school effects, and that worried us. So we did multi-level regression, which we did only in SPSS, which took account of the nesting of children. This is just for the statistical geeks. We took account of the nesting of children within schools. So what changed in this course of the whole school year? Remember, this began in October and it ended usually easy peasy, lasted 12 to 14 weeks. We had a significant increase in the home learning environment, in the intervention group, significant, over the control group, remember, who are waiting to get it next year, but we had no effects on any child measure. So we were very disappointed. All of this work, 6 workshops during the year, all of these play bags going home, all of these questionnaires completed by everybody, we had no child outcome. As I said earlier, you have these levers. This is the family, the really big one, but by God, it's hard to change. It's very hard. This is the little one, the smaller one, half the size. Statistically in our study, half the effect, but I think it's easier to change. So what is our conclusion? These small scale studies in a country like India, these samples are nothing, but they have very high internal validity. These studies are very, very well carefully designed. So they have high internal validity, but external validity, like generalizing, these are just in a few different locations. So we cannot generalize yet, but we're beginning. So if you really, can you see it? Yeah, you can see it. This is the only one that is significant is the top one, which is the home learning environment. And these are adjusted mean scores. So we have taken account of the pretest scores. And the home learning environment is significant this is a mistake. This is 0.05. I am sorry, this is not 0.5, it's 0.5. This is a mistake, 0.5.
Yes.
Yeah, 0.5. And the confidence, the estimate of the effect, is there. So we did not change behavioral adjustment, we did not change language, we didn't change daily living skills, we only changed the home learning environment. And that's very disappointing, because if we change the home learning environment, why did the children not change? Okay,
right.
Maybe the intervention hasn't been strong enough to bite yet. Maybe it will change next year. I think it's very, very hard to change children through the family. it's easier to change children, I think, through the preschool. Engagement with the program, we had 9 intervention schools, and they got it for free. But when the study was over, 8 of the 9 are paying for it themselves. So I think that is a sign of the success of the program. It's not very expensive. They had to pay the trainer to come and train their staff and the materials. But 8 of the 9 schools are continuing. So schools liked it, but because schools liked it does not mean it has an effect. So schools have to like it, or they won't do it, but it doesn't guarantee. So never be impressed. When I was a very young researcher and I just moved to England, I went with my colleague Stephen Scott, some of you may know his work, a child psychiatrist, and we had a parent behavior management program. And we went to convince the director of education in Lambeth. Lambeth is a big authority in London. How many, India, your numbers are fantastic, but Lambeth probably has 400 schools. For us, it's a big authority. We went to talk to the chief because we wanted him to fund our program, which was behavioral management, teaching the parent skills. But we didn't have any data. We'd only done maybe a little bit of it, but we had videos of mothers saying how to change their children. So we took the video, we showed it to the director of schools, and he said, "This is wonderful, I will fund this program." And Stephen and I walked out, and we said, "He's stupid. Doesn't he want real hard evidence? 4 mothers sitting around a table saying, we think this program is wonderful. Our children have changed. If I were in charge of all the money he's in charge of, I would not have given the money away." On 4 mothers saying they thought the program was wonderful? And in the program, the homegrown program, the PEN program, which didn't have any child outcomes, qualitative interviews, which we did do, all of the mothers said that their children had improved. All of them. They said, "We do all these things at home, my child's vocabulary has come along," but on the Peasy, the objective outcome, the vocabulary had not changed. The teacher filled out the Peasy, not the parent, the teacher. So it's very, very hard to change children. It's even harder to change families. But if we really want to get serious funding from governments or donors, we have to have hard evidence, not a video of 4 mothers sitting around saying, "Oh, change my child's life." I couldn't believe that director. I thought he should be fired immediately from his post. He was wasting my taxpayer money. Okay, so 94% of the staff, because we gave staff interviews, they reported increased confidence on a scale of 1 to 5. So very good, staff feel more confident. But this particular intervention did not change a child yet. So schools like it, they're paying for it, staff are more confident, parents think it's very nice, but there's no objective measure yet. The objective measure on child change is the parent app. That's the one that had the child change. So discussion, it's promising. The home learning environment probably did get changed. But the limitations, remember every study has limitations. Even EPI, which had so much money behind it. All studies have limitations. It had a small sample. This was 150 families. We did a really good randomized controlled trial. You get your baseline, collect first, and then you randomize. The best way to conduct a trial is collect your baseline and then do your randomization. We had to randomize afterwards just because of scheduling. The schools needed to know which teachers were going to come on training so they could arrange for cover, for them to have days off. So we had to let the schools know right away who was going to be in the intervention group so they could arrange cover so their teachers could come to training. So we randomized after we had allocated. There's some missing data, but not much missing data, and a lot of this is self-report, and self-report always has to be anchored by some outside validation, and we don't have it. So summing up, the EPI study, which you almost saw, demonstrates the importance of the home learning environment. 3,000 children proportionally representative all over England, show beyond a shadow of a doubt how important the early home learning environment is, and the early home learning environment has a more powerful impact than the primary school home learning or the secondary school. Because in primary and secondary school, children are influenced by their peers, but preschool children are still very, very much influenced by their families. So the early home learning important, and that is the EPI study. Then going to these two small-scale interventions, easy peasy, shows promise in improving child's self-regulation. And you saw two of the games that the parent played. However, there were many, we've written a paper on this, and we acknowledge the many, many limitations of the evaluation of the app, primarily all of the attrition. We didn't have enough parents at the end, and there was nothing we could do. Research cannot tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt, because all research has limitations. But certainly don't be like that director of schools and just say 4 parents. I mean, that is not research. I mean, these two studies have been researched, but they're not strong enough yet. But easy peasy, because the results were so promising, the government now is doing a proper evaluation. So next steps, we're doing a larger scale trial of easy peasy. We have a range of measures, including direct tests of children, and teachers are going to fill out profiles. So the next study will be much, much better. We hope it shows promising results, but it might not. We don't know. But we're especially interested in direct child measures, and we will have teacher-completed rating scales, not just parent-completed, but teacher-completed, because the teacher is more objective. And these are the references. So if I had to sum it up, what have 2 decades of English research on early childhood shown us? The EPI study has shown us that parents matter desperately in children's life, and the home learning environment before the child goes to school is the most important of the home learning environments. That is the time to intervene. Okay. And the EPI study showed that parents have an effect, by the way, parent education about 0.6, those of you who know effect sizes. Preschool has an effect of about 0.3. So parents are more important and have a stronger impact. But as you saw in these 2 small-scale evaluations, it's not easy to change parents because, as they say, stuff happens. And stuff happens. So these are the references. So I present these 2 small interventions as kind of very early stages, moving in the right direction, but not yet proven fully. So that's the end.
What Professor Katie Sylva said, that if our end point is that we want outcomes in children, say we want them to have the joy of learning, then we must, through whatever process we are taking them through, and this applies to teachers as well as children, we need to be able to demonstrate how that impact is there on children. That's the most convincing way of getting people, whether it's teachers or parents or anybody else, to be really convinced about something if you can show it with children. So that demonstration, I think, is very key. The second point I want to make is just share my own experience. Very recently, I had gone to see a mother's reading program, which was being conducted in one of the states in India. So it was with the Anganwadis, the ICDS centers, and these mothers had been brought in the afternoon, and they had been given very nice picture books, story books, and they were supposed to sit with the child in the lap and, read the stories out to them. And the effect had to be seen. And that must be part of their research. So my observation of those mothers was that first, number one, a number of them were illiterate. They had never held a book in their hand. So the whole situation was somehow very, very artificial for them, very uncomfortable for them because they had not ever done that. And a couple of them were a little more educated, so you could see that they were more comfortable, whereas the others were just holding the books. The other thing was that there was a kind of a look of being lost, right through. Because, so I think there's a cultural dimension to this whole domain of parent engagement with children, because parents normally, although we say that we have a very rich tradition of infant games and toys and children's games and all that, and there has been some documentation which is amazing. And what has always really fascinated me with this documentation is that almost 99% of those infant games and children's games have very appropriate developmental significance. So for example, if sensory motor is the initial stage, where the sensory stimulation is needed, the initial traditional games have been very much tuned to helping children develop that sensory stability, sensory ability. So so that is always a question in my mind, where was this coming from, Who were these people who really thought of these? And what is also amazing is that these games are universal. Of course, they are adapted to different cultures, different languages. Even within India, every language group has their own similar games. So that's a cultural heritage that we have. But again, this is my hypothesis, that I think those games were meant for the grandparents and grandmothers largely in the original setup, because the parents themselves did not have the sole responsibility of parenting, and therefore with the going of the grandparents, because they are not available anymore, those games have also gone. So now there is this whole cultural dimension of children. Yes, you bring them up well, keep them clean, feed them well, send them to school when they're supposed to. If you can get them to do tuitions, get them to do tuitions. Do the best for your child with all the best intention, but there is no understanding or no what should I say? This is not only in the poorest or the underprivileged. I'm talking across social strata. There is no understanding of the parents' own role and interaction, the value of that interaction. That is not there. So somewhere when we, especially in our context, and I think when you have immigrants, and in their case you have, if you're doing this, I think somewhere that cultural, the location of the group, the parent group, is very, very significant. Because how do we really address that? Coming back to this example that I had, of this experience that I had of this group, and I told you, where these mothers were just sitting with the book, not really comfortable, it just occurred to me. So I asked the person who had accompanied me, I said, why don't you ask them if they ever tell any story to the children? So, so this particular woman who was just like very uncomfortable, I didn't speak the language, so I couldn't. So this person asked her, okay, do you ever tell stories to the children? Her face lit up. And she said, of course I do. And then she started immediately narrating the story that she tells the children, in that language with a lot of excitement. And she said that what she does is, and I'm taking a minute to say that, how she devised her own story. She said, what I do is that I just narrate, I just give another name, some other child's name, and I just say that in the morning this happened and that happened and that happened, and at the end of the day, the child's own routine. And at the end of the day, at the end of the story, the child suddenly discovers, oh, it's about me. And the way she described it, her expressions, I couldn't get the language, but it was really a very eye-opener for me. So what I'm trying to say is that somewhere we need to, again, use the principle of known to unknown. That somewhere we need to be rooting this whole thing in something that is very much a part of the culture or practice or existing interaction in the family, and then building on that to how to improve it further. So I think that is very, very important. And with that, I think I would just like to thank Professor Sylva for a very stimulating, you can see the number of questions, people are still picking up their hands. And I hope that we will have another opportunity when you've done the next round of these interventions to listen to you. And but also, if people are working, I think I would encourage them to share what they are doing with Professor Sylva and initiate a conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
It was really a pleasure to have Professor Kathy with us since morning to share with us the findings of a study conducted in England. And I hope everybody has been enriched with her experience and the findings. I also thank Professor Kaul for being a wonderful chair for this session, and also for her continuous association with CECED, which will be continued. And I'm delighted to have such a distinguished guest with us who were really very participative and very vocal. So it was really very interactive session and interesting session. Sorry for the constraint of time, we were unable to take many other questions. But I think so if you want, you can write to us on our email ID and we can forward to Professor Kathy for her response.